People who have ADHD often have lower dopamine levels, and so they're constantly trying to stimulate themselves.
You worked with Justin Bieber, Raven-Symoné. Do you have any success stories on working with clients with autism?
Yes, we've actually scanned thousands of autistic brains. They have a certain pattern, so the front part of their brain tends to be busier.
Dr. Daniel Amen, the psychiatrist who has scanned over 250,000 brains, including those of Khloé Kardashian, Justin Bieber, and Bella Hadid.
He is redefining ADHD, exposing hidden brain injuries, and changing how we treat the mind.
On average, Americans eat about 150 pounds of sugar a year. It's okay to like sweet things, but you just want them to like you back.
What's one simple thing everyone should start doing today to take better care of their brain?
The most important one is whenever you go to make a decision today, just ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it?
But if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice about mental health, what would it be?
Hey folks, hope we're doing well. Thank you so much for tuning into the Inclusion Matters podcast. If you like what you hear and you really believe in what we do to any degree whatsoever, or if anything we have said has had a positive impact on you today, please consider subscribing to be in the know about everything and to help us boost the algorithm so we can spread our message even further. Tune in, guys. Love you. Cheers.
Hey friends, it's Clara. Just a quick note, if you hear some silent parts in the podcast, it's because I'm using my AAC tablet to find the right words. It takes a little time. And to be honest, we don't have the funds right now for a fancy editor to cut everything perfectly. So, thanks for sticking with us and for listening.
Hey folks, hope we're doing well. Welcome back to the Inclusion Matters podcasts. We are your hosts, Adin Boyer and Clara Woods. Don't worry, Bettina's just a fly on the wall today for just some extra communication support, but sometimes you gotta have that second brain every once in a while, right? I know how you feel. Today is a really exciting episode, as they all are, but this one is especially exciting because we have the amazing Dr. Daniel Amen on our show today. It's a huge pleasure to meet you. I took a look at your stuff and I really love everything that you put out there. So we got a lot of great questions for you guys today. And since you guys already know each other pretty well, I'd say let's get a nice head start going with a question on your end. So what you got for us to start us off?
I first heard about you from a post where you said people with ADHD sometimes create conflicts just because they need dopamine. That post really helped my family. We finally understood why my dad and we both have ADHD, act the way we do. Can you share some easy tips on how to handle this better and maybe avoid conflicts before they even start?
I love that question so much. And I know more about ADHD than I want to. My first wife had it, has it. Several of my children have it. And when my daughter, Caitlin, was 3 years old, she used to run up to her brother and kick him as hard as she could. And then she'd run away laughing. And if he didn't chase her, she would come and kick him again. And I'm like, why does she do this? But people who have ADHD often have lower dopamine levels. They have lower function in the front part of their brain. And so they're constantly trying to stimulate themselves. And it's not conscious. They don't know that they're doing it, but they do it. And they also can be negative seeking. They can look for what's wrong because that gives them a lot more of a jolt than looking for what's right. And so if you know it, one, you want to get ADHD treated. And for the people who love them, I often say, don't pick up the rope. It's like they're always handing you a rope and say, play tug of war with me. And it's like, don't do it. Because if you do it, you find yourself caught in this loop of negativity and negative interactions that damage relationships. And so know it. And then I often will distract the ADHD people in my life. So when I feel like, okay, they're just trying to play this game, let's have a problem, I just don't buy into it. And then I'll look for what's right rather than what's wrong and get them treated so they're less likely to do that. And treatment can be exercise, it can be supplements, it can be medicine. And people go, oh no, I'll never take medicine. And people often ask me, what are the side effects of taking medicine for ADHD? And you might decrease your appetite, you may have some trouble sleeping, but they don't ask the follow-up question, which is, what are the side effects of not taking the treatment? Chronic conflict, divorce, incarceration, bankruptcy, school failure. And so it's always important, yes, always ask the side effects of medicine, but then ask the side effects of not taking it.
Just one question. You said that they put the rope, right? Like to, since I'm the side family, like I'm with Clara and they are full. We went in a fight, right, Clara, on Sunday, and then became a big fight, family thing, because we are doing a video, and then they start, especially Clara and Clara, between them, they do the fight. And then I'm just there, and then I need to come in. How we just say, okay, I'm leaving, and I'm not anymore in this. Or
So what I often do to intervene is often interrupt it by saying, what's the goal? And does this get you what you want? What do you want in this situation? What's the goal? And for all of my patients, I do an exercise with them called the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want. Relationships, work or school, money, physical, emotional, spiritual health. What do you want? And like with my wife, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. Always want that. And so in the middle of stress, I'm always going, what's the goal in the situation? And the goal is not to say everything you think, because people who have ADHD, they often have a lower filter and they think something and then it gets out of their mouth. And Jerry Seinfeld, the famous comedian, said the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. And if you filter all your thoughts through what's the goal in this situation, you begin to act better, because the goal is love. The goal is connection. The goal is support. And it's generally not what's happening at the moment.
This is incredibly intriguing to me because I find myself the polar opposite of all of that. I avoid conflict. I like, as much as humanly possible. I don't thrive off of it at all. It actually sends me downhill. I was always, a huge, massive rule follower and like very well behaved in school as far as rules were concerned. If I was acting out and I had behavioral issues, it was because I couldn't cope with, certain things. So this is very, very fascinating to me, and it helps me understand people with ADHD a lot better. I've asked myself if I have ADHD because me being on the autism spectrum, it often has a comorbidity with ADHD. But in my very, layman's research, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I don't believe I have ADHD, and I think that might solidify things further that I don't have ADHD.
Although there's subtypes of ADHD.
Yeah.
There's 7 different types. And the people who have autism often have the over-focused subtype. So the problem is not that they can't pay attention, it's they can't shift their attention, and they can get stuck on certain thoughts or certain behaviors. And so you could still have issues with focus, but it's different. You're not poking people to get a reaction out of them. But if things don't go the way you think they should go, then that can be really upsetting.
Yeah, it's fascinating how they both intertwine in a lot of ways, but they're also so different in so many other ways as well. I'm thinking a lot about disability a lot, and sometimes I feel like my brain is short-circuiting when I think about it, because thinking about things is just difficult. I don't like to think sometimes. It overwhelms me. There's just a lot to think about. And sometimes it's also very, very draining for me energy-wise. Recently, about a few months ago, I learned about something called the spoon theory. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
You've not heard of the spoon theory? Whoa! Okay, but it's very, very cool. It was an idea, in short, that someone came up with, that everybody has a set of like spoons, hypothetically, and the things you do throughout the day take a certain amount of energy, so you have to discard a spoon, with each thing that you do. Now, if you do something that is like incredibly draining, then you might, take away like 3 spoons. The person who created this, and a lot of other people would probably be able to explain it a lot better than me. But if you run out of spoons, then you experience burnout. And this is the case with anybody and everybody, but it's especially, pertinent for neurodivergent people, I think, because it's important for them to know how much energy that they should be putting into certain things, because certain things are taking way more energy than other things. Unexpected things that you might not always anticipate are going to happen can take away way more spoons. For example, socializing with people, for a lot of people, everybody has a social battery, but I know it can cause big burnout for people on the spectrum, especially. So socializing can take away some spoons, so then they need some time to, step away and recover, to regain the spoons. I'm curious what you think about that. What is your first impression on
it
that?
reminds me of a term I coined a long time ago called brain reserve. Brain reserve is the extra tissue you have to deal with whatever stress comes your way. And if you have a lot of reserve, you can manage a lot. And if you have less, then it becomes harder.
Yeah.
And brain reserve actually starts before you're made. That if your parents were good to their bodies, you're more likely when they come together and they create you to have more reserve. But if mom drank when she was pregnant, if dad smoked, if mom had infections, you're born with less reserve. And then whatever happens throughout our lives, from head trauma, toxic exposure, being raised by parents who struggle with addiction or alcohol, that's all stealing your reserve. And so I always want to increase my reserve. So in your analogy, increase the number of spoons I have,
Yeah.
so that I can manage whatever stress comes my way. And the one question to always ask yourself to increase your reserve is, whatever you're doing now, is it good for your brain or bad for it? And if it's good for it, you're boosting your reserve, whether it's going to bed half an hour early or exercising or taking your supplements, or are you stealing from your reserve? The extra drink, the fight, the staying up late to play video games.
But I'm curious more, because I feel like there are some things that are very, very good for my brain in a different kind of way that I wouldn't be able to find in another way. but they do come with a price too. Do you think there's a gray area between things that are good for your brain and bad for your brain?
Like what?
Like, for example, if I, let's say I have a massive passion for video games, but it is truly something that I enjoy doing, and I know how to, cope with it healthily, I set aside about half an hour at night before I go to bed to play some video games, and I feel great because it's something I enjoy doing, and then I can put it down and then go to bed.
So I think if you can do that in a half an hour, it's not a problem with that. I think the problem becomes is these games are actually designed to be addictive.
Yeah.
And they work by wearing out the pleasure centers in the brain.
Yeah.
They
pleasure.
work by increasing dopamine availability. But the more you press on the pleasure centers in the brain, the more you press on them, the less reactive they become. So that's what addiction is, right? You need more and more to feel anything at all. But if you love them and you can do them in small doses, well, I don't see a problem
Yeah.
with that. And especially if you're doing everything else right. Like I have a number of NFL players, so people who've signed $80 million contracts to play football, so they're not going to not play. Football obviously is
Yeah.
bad for your brain.
Yeah.
It's bad for your brain. And so if you're going to do something like that, you have to do everything else right.
Yeah.
Because if you do that and you're drinking and you're not sleeping and you're eating low quality food, right? If you go in an NFL locker room, just watch the food spread. So much of it is just bad food. Then you compound the problem.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me because I found that, I know social media has that tendency too, but since, we're both kind of entrepreneurs in our own ways and we have to promote all the time on social media, it's, but also in order to do that and understand what we're getting into, we have to consume to some degree. And so I think that just being mindful,
of it.
yeah, it makes all the difference.
Yes, because I'm often thinking about, what can I teach people? And I have a large platform, but I'm also not scrolling.
Yeah, it's if I do scroll, I have to really be mindful. I still fall into that trap every now and
Yeah,
again.
my wife says she starts scrolling, she starts seeing everything wrong with her, and she thinks of calling the plastic surgeon.
That's
so
that's what we don't
it's
want.
very expensive.
Yeah. I totally not. I don't relate to the plastic surgery part, but I do relate to the mindless.
And then just
scrolling.
comparing yourself and seeing what's wrong.
Yeah, it's a lot of that. I love that. Makes total sense to me. Yeah, I'm also a lot more curious about social media and like kind of my relationship with it. But in the meantime, I want to give you a platform to ask another question.
Clara needs an emergency stop to go to the restroom.
Okay. Well, you got to take care of your body too, not just your brain. And your turn. What you got?
Who wants to do the one of his daughter? I think it's 4.
4. In your book Healing ADD, I read about your daughter and all the struggles she had when she was little, until you scanned her brain and finally figured things out. Then, with just one medicine, she totally changed, doing better at school and having way happier relationships. How is she doing today?
She's doing great. And if I wouldn't have figured out that she had ADD, if I wouldn't have looked at her brain, would have condemned her to a life of mediocrity because she wasn't getting anywhere near her potential. And I was so sad. And it sounds terrible, but when I say this, I didn't think she was that smart. And it had nothing to do with her not being smart. Is she didn't have full access to her brain. And she went from getting mostly B's and C's, working her brains out, to straight A's. And then getting into one of the world's best veterinarian schools. It's just like, wow. Like, how many people are living lives of mediocrity when they don't have to?
Yeah, there's a lot of untapped potential in there. Well, it's so great to hear that she's doing great. How old is she?
40.
She's 40. Yeah. So I'm sure she probably has a good career in the vet field, right?
Well, she actually got pregnant and decided not to go to Scotland. And so she's mostly a mom, but just spectacular at what she does.
Still a lot of great potential there. So that's amazing. I love to hear that. All right. So my next question is this. Now you have a great clientele of all sorts of celebrities who have gone through all sorts of things. I know you said you worked with Justin Bieber. I saw there was a thing with Raven-Symoné. I watched that video. That was fairly recent. It looked awesome. Do you have any success stories on working with clients with autism? And if so, I'd love to hear them.
Yes, we've actually scanned thousands of autistic brains. Mm-hmm. And they have a certain pattern. I mean, it's not one thing, sort of like ADD is not one thing.
Of course, yeah.
Autism's not one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But tend to have busy frontal lobes. So the front part of their brain tends to be busier, which is why they need things a certain way or they get upset. And their cerebellum in the back bottom part of the brain tends to be sleepier. And balancing it, so we have this one patient I dearly love. Well, first saw him, he was a real mess. He wasn't talking much, had a lot of tantrums. But when we balanced his brain, he ended up finishing college, living on his own, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
And you know, it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. I don't even really love the diagnosis because you can have some people who have autism that really will never be independent, and other people like Elon Musk who are sort of running the government at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite a
you know,
spectrum.
I mean, he's the richest person in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and he went on Saturday Night Live saying, "I have autism."
Yeah, there's it really affects everybody so differently. It is wild. And that's also like an interesting thing that I'm trying to figure out and think about a lot is, you know, what differences do I have with other people with autism and versus, you know, similarities. So, well, that's good to hear. You mentioned though with the patient on the spectrum, when we balanced his brain, he was able to finish college. What do you mean by balanced his brain?
Well, if you look, so that's what we do at
Yeah.
Adin clinics. We will scan your brain.
Yeah.
And like we scanned Clara's brain. And once you see it, if it works too hard, you want to calm it down. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't work hard enough, you want to stimulate it.
Okay.
And so sometimes we'll do hyperbaric oxygen, which I find very helpful. Sometimes there are supplements, sometimes they're medicine. Often it's lifestyle changes, like getting rid of the sugar and the foods that turn to sugar.
Right. Yeah, she's laughing because
Clara and I have had this discussion.
and I think that would probably be a good segue into your next one.
It's an everyday discussion.
You gotta ask about the ice cream thing. I mean,
2. I'm really thankful for Amen clinics, because they helped me understand my anxiety a lot better. But honestly, sticking to my nutrition plan is so hard. I just love sweets. Every time I want something sugary, I think of you. But usually, I just can't resist. Help.
So think of this term, replace, don't erase. My grandfather was a candy maker. And my first memory is I'm 4 years old, standing on a stool at the stove, making fudge with my grandfather. I love sweet things. But I also want to have a healthy brain, and I don't want to be fat. So what do? There's a company I like. I have no financial interest in them. They're called Sweet Leaf. They make 11 different flavors of stevia. And stevia has actually been found to be one of the sweeteners that's healthful for people. And they make something called, they make chocolate stevia. And for whatever reason, I love it. So I'll get, if I want something sweet, I'll get sparkling water, put a couple of droppers of chocolate stevia in it. It's like I have a soda. It's very sweet. I love it. And it loves me back. Because I don't know if you've ever been in a bad relationship. I have, and I'm not doing it anymore. I'm married to my best friend. And I'm for sure not doing it with food. I am only going to love things that love me back. And so every night, and my wife knows how to make it, but she always makes me make it. I make brain healthy hot chocolate, and I take unsweetened almond milk, organic raw cacao, put it in a blender with chocolate stevia, and it's only 60 calories, and it's so good. I love it, and it loves me back. And in Tana's cookbook, the Brain Warriors Way cookbook, she has got amazing desserts. And so it's okay to like sweet things, but you just want them to like you back. And one of the things I like is get an apple and some nut butter. It's sweet, but you balance the carbs from the apple with healthy fat and protein and the nut butter. And it's good. You only have to find 10 sweet things you love that love you back. And so I would go on a hunt. And it's like, oh, I love ice cream. Well, there's probably a healthy way to make it so it's not hurting you. Because if you have a vulnerable brain, and odds are many people listening to this podcast have a vulnerable brain.
well, I for sure do that.
Right? If you have a vulnerable brain, you want to do everything to optimize it rather than hurt it. And sugar is the enemy. It's pro-inflammatory, has no nutrients in it, and it's addictive. They did this study with rats at Purdue University, and they gave one group of rats cocaine, and they really liked it. They gave another group sugar, and they really liked it. And then they gave them a choice, and they went for the sugar.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I'm curious though if
I'm so happy you asked me that question.
this, I know it's your specialty. Yeah, I'm curious how similar the rats would be in choosing that to humans, but how similar is that?
Well, humans are addicted to sugar,
Yeah.
right? If you now look at the American population, 75% of Americans are overweight, 43% are obese. It's the biggest brain drain in the history of the United States. On average, Americans eat about 150 pounds of sugar a year. And when you go to the store, they'll often say, oh, this is a health bar. But when you actually look at the ingredients, it's got 4 different types of sugar in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I took a health class in high school, when you look at the ingredients, you got to steer clear of the dyes like the red 40 and steer clear of enriched things, enriched flour, bleached, chemicals that you can't pronounce, probably avoid.
Right.
That's pretty.
And there are 14 names
Yeah.
for sugar on labels.
Yeah. So,
Organic cane crystals. And you're like, oh, that must be good for you. No, it's sugar.
yeah, I know, like that is literally sugar. Or you use the elemental name of sugar. so yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting how companies will try to do that. But sugar is, it is definitely addictive, and I definitely feel like I used to be way worse at it than I am now. I used to be a constant soda drinker. I drank soda all the time, and now I have completely moved to sparkling water.
It's so good for you.
Yeah.
There's a new study out on aspartame, which
Yeah.
is the sweetener in Diet Coke.
Mm-hmm.
And it increases anxiety, not only in you, but in your babies and grandbabies. It's like, well, how scary is that?
Yeah.
That maybe this epidemic of mental health problems in kids has to do with the 5,000 products available in the United States with aspartame.
Yeah, aspartame is pretty bad for sure. It's a lot, and I know that there are a lot of people that are still struggling with that, and I think I'm still struggling with that, and what I'm putting into my body, and a lot of people are, and food, I know is a hard topic for a lot of people to talk about, especially if they have history of eating disorders and whatnot.
It's this one question.
Yeah.
Do I love it? And does it love me back?
Yeah.
It's that so one of the children I love dearly has Tourette syndrome, which is a tic disorder where people have both motor and vocal tics. And I put him on magnesium, and I put him on an elimination diet. Eliminate gluten, dairy, corn, soy, artificial dyes, and sweeteners. Tics went down 90%. And then he came to visit me, and when he came off the plane, he actually looked sad because I was like so excited to see him. And he said, I don't like any of the food. That was his first comment to me. I don't like any of the food. And I'm like, he's going to be with me for 4 days. I'm like, all right, you and I are going to the store. Your job in these next 4 days is to find 20 foods you love that love you back. And now it's 10 years later, he doesn't have tics at all. Our list is 173 foods he loves that loves him back. So if you love your brain, this isn't hard. It just takes consistent effort. And I ask my patients a lot, if you had a $10 million racehorse, would you ever feed it junk food?
Probably not, no.
Only if you were an idiot,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you have this great investment
Yeah.
and you want the horse to win.
Yeah.
You don't win if you give it bad food.
Yeah.
But aren't you worth so much more?
Yeah. And then that plays into self-love and self-esteem, and I have more questions on that as well. But I look forward to asking that. But in the meantime, I think it's your turn.
free. We did some research and saw that a lot of people still don't get your work or mission, especially when you talk about normalizing brain health or basic stuff like quitting alcohol and avoiding marijuana. You even get a bunch of hate comments. How do you handle all that negativity and still keep believing in what you're doing?
It's all the stories of people change. Everywhere I go around the world, people come up to me and nobody says negative things to me. They all come up and go, your work changed my life. And, you know, on the internet, every idiot has a voice. And sometimes the negative comments are not real humans. And it's crazy when you think about it, but they're bots. And social media platforms are designed to elevate the negative comments because it's negativity that stokes engagement. And so I believe what I believe because it works and it changes people's lives. When I first started imaging, it was 1991. So it was 34 years ago, and I loved it. But many of my colleagues told me I shouldn't do it because it wasn't the standard, right? Psychiatrists don't look at the brain. And I'm like, well, my training is in diagnosing insanity, and that's insane. And but it made me very anxious initially. Because I like it when people like me. And like you, I don't really like conflict. And yet I'm getting all this negativity. But it changed in April 1995 when I got a call from my sister-in-law, Sherry, who told me my 9-year-old nephew, Andrew, who was my godson, attacked a little girl on the baseball field that day for no reason out of the blue. And I'm like, Sherry, what else is going on? And she said, Danny's different. He's mean, doesn't smile anymore. And I went into his room and I found 2 pictures he had drawn. One of them, he was hanging from a tree in a suicide attempt. The other picture, he was shooting other children. So in retrospect, you could just see he would have become one of the school shooters. And I'm like, I want to see him tomorrow. And they lived 8 hours from me, and they put him in the car and drove him to see me. And as I was sitting with Andrew, I'm like, buddy, what's wrong? And he said, Uncle Danny, I don't know. I'm mad all the time. I'm like, is anybody teasing you? No. Is anybody hurting you? No. Is anybody touching you in places they shouldn't be touching you? No. And I knew I had to look at his brain because, you know, I've been imaging for 4 years now, and I thought he'd have a problem in his left temporal lobe, which is an area of the brain often involved in violence. Well, it turned out he had a cyst the size of a golf ball in his left temporal lobe. And when they drained it, his behavior completely went back to normal. And it was at that moment I stopped caring whether or not you liked me. Is at that moment I stopped being afraid of conflict. If you don't look, you don't know. And since then, the negativity sort of just rolls off of me because the positivity is so strong.
It's to learn how to see the positive it and not the negative it.
Well, we're just publishing a study on negativity bias. People who are more negative have lower activity in the front part of their brain. That's why they're conflict seeking, negative seeking. And you can train the brain to be more positive. Like every day, I start every day with today is going to be a great day.
I saw a couple of videos in my research,
And I end every day with what went well today. You can train that because we did a study. So we look at negativity bias on all of our patients. And so we looked at it on 7,500 patients. They have an increased risk for out of the 300 questions we ask about mental health stuff when people come to see us at Amen Clinics, they're going to say yes to 75% of them if they're negative.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and obviously it sounds
That's
like
a great question too.
yeah,
Claire.
yeah. There's probably a lot of research behind that as well. Probably no, there is. I know. That's awesome. So yeah. Sometimes, though, and as far as the brain, I know that there's a lot of things about myself that I don't understand about myself, too. But one major issue that I've always had that is inherently tied to my autism that I don't really hear a lot of other people talking about is, since I was diagnosed as a toddler, so I received years of intensive therapy and all aspects of communication all had to be manually taught to me through years of intensive therapy growing up. But another thing I had to learn manually that I couldn't do just by watching other people or just feeling it was significance of events. I had no idea of knowing whether something was a big deal or not unless someone told me. Now, in my brain, when I spill something on the ground, it's like immediate fight or flight, and it ruins my day. It completely ruins my day, and it has a tendency to do that. Not always anymore, but it has a tendency to do that oftenly, and it has throughout my life. But everyone around me says, "Oh, that's no big deal. All you have to do is go and grab a paper towel and clean it up." But I can't bring myself to do that because my world is crumbling down when something like that. Now, so basically I'm now at a point in my life where I have convinced myself in my head that things are not a big deal or things are a big deal because society deems it that way. But my body is still reacting so heavily to things that are deemed as not a big deal or so little to things that are deemed a big deal. I have such a big brain-body disconnect, and I've been working on it heavily with my therapists. So what are some tips you have for shaking off a constant agonizing adrenaline or a fight or flight?
That was so insightful.
Yeah.
I loved listening to you explain this.
Oh,
and it was the cognitive rigidity that was torturing you. If things don't go the way you think they should go, you can't stand it, and you internally explode. Like I had 2 patients in 1 week. Their parents surprised them by taking them to Disneyland. They had 3-hour tantrums in the Timon parking lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Don't you like Disneyland?" And
Right.
I like Disneyland. I'm
Yeah.
like, it was, things didn't go the way they expected because their frontal lobes worked too hard, and their cerebellum, we talked about that, the back part of the brain, that's like the brain's processor, like a CPU in a computer. It's not fast enough. And so they just get stuck. And so if I was you, I would figure out what are those things that really trigger you. And I would haven them. Do you know what havening is?
Not in the verb context. No.
So I would haven them and I would do them repeatedly. Like I'd be spilling a lot just to get it out of your system. So haven was developed by not a psychiatrist, by a physician in New York, Ron Rudin. And what he discovered is if you do bilateral hemisphere stimulation, so stimulate both sides of the brain, while you bring up the trauma, it just calms it down in your head. And so very simply, so if you think about the last time you spilled something, the last time you were really upset, think about it, feel it, and then rub your hands together like this. Or my favorites, grab your shoulders and stroke down. And when you do that, so initially think about how upset you really were. I mean, feel it. And for like 20 seconds, go into it. And then, still while doing this, do it for like 2 minutes. Switch your mind to something you love. And he even has you at the end of it sing happy birthday. So just silly things to distract yourself. But it's this bilateral hemisphere stimulation, right? Because when I touch this shoulder, it's activating the right hemisphere of my brain. And when I touch this shoulder, it's activating the left hemisphere. And so if you do that, it just stops bothering you and you become more flexible, because that's the goal, right? I teach all of my patients the rule of 12. And I came up with this rule 6 years ago when my wife turned 50 and I'm taking her to Paris for her birthday. And I'm like, 12 things are going to go wrong. Let's promise ourselves not to get upset until the 13th thing has gone wrong. And 4 things went wrong, and nobody was upset the whole trip. Psychological flexibility is a sign of psychological health. So you want to learn to roll with things without rolling over.
Yeah.
So havening, and people can learn more about havening. I write about it in my books, but they can also go to havening, like Safe Haven, havening.org, and learn all about it. Even find a havening therapist.
Yeah, that's something that I think would probably be worth checking out on my end, definitely. It's a lot to think about, definitely. I appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you so much. All right, your turn.
Five. What's one simple thing everyone should start doing today to take better care of their brain?
Ask yourself this one question. So I worked with BJ Fogg for 6 months. He is a professor at Stanford on how people change. And he wrote a book called Tiny Habits. It's like, what's the smallest thing I can do today that will have the biggest impact? And it's the mother tiny habit, the most important one, is whenever you go to make a decision today, just ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with information and love, you just start doing better things for your brain. And with a better brain always comes a better life.
What if you don't know if it's good or bad for your brain and you have to find out somehow?
Well, ChatGPT it. I mean, it's so easy. It's just so easy. But quite frankly, most 7-year-olds know. Is it good for your brain or bad for it? So I went into my daughter's 2nd grade class. She was 7. And I wrote on the board 20 things. Football, hitting soccer balls with your head, smoking, alcohol, marijuana, orange juice, apples, exercise, new learning. And I'm like, separate these. Good for your brain or bad for it. 7 years old. They got 19 out of 20 right.
Was the one that was wrong the fruit juice?
It was fruit juice.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
They put it in the good category whenever you unwrap fruit sugar
Yeah.
from its fiber source, it turns toxic in your body.
Right. Yeah, I know that fruit juices are very unhealthy, as opposed like when it's already done like that.
Carlo wants to do orange juice all the time now because we have good orange, and I'm saying you start following that woman and we can't have fruit juice. And I said yesterday I saw
Eat the
Dr.
orange.
Raymond said
Yeah.
we can't have orange juice.
Eat the orange.
Yeah. Eat the orange or juice the orange itself and not do anything else with it. Yeah. Instead of actually buying like pre-packaged fruit juice. Yeah. Right. So that makes sense. Yeah. It's awesome. I feel like there are a lot of, I suppose I could ChatGPT it. There are a lot of really complex things though. So
But no, I want people to think of it simply.
Yeah.
Good for my brain or bad for it. Staying up late, not exercising, vaping. I have a mnemonic I teach my patients called Bright Minds. You want to keep your brain healthy or rescue it, you have to prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors. And it really teaches you what's good for your brain and bad for it. So, for example, B is for blood flow. Low blood flow is the number one brain imaging predictor of Alzheimer's. And being sedentary lowers blood flow. Much caffeine lowers blood flow. Nicotine lowers blood flow. Alcohol, marijuana lower blood flow. And beets, of all things, increase blood flow.
The things that I'm thinking of, though, are things more like, should I go out and socialize with friends or should I stay home, sort of thing.
So it depends how stressful it is for you.
Yeah.
You know, during the pandemic, the extroverts suffered,
Yeah.
but the introverts loved it because they didn't have to deal with other people.
Yeah.
I think for you, it depends.
Yeah.
Is having relationships rewarding?
It is.
for you?
I would describe myself as a solid ambivert. Like I'm equally as
I love that term
as
so much.
equally as introverted as I am extroverted.
Yeah. And so you have to like flexibility we talked about. If you see it as a problem to solve, then I tell this to my patients too. Every day, you win or you learn. There is no failure. And I was in Paris in August because one of my patients is an Olympian. And in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, she failed completely. Didn't make one bar. She's a pole vaulter. Because she had a head injury 5 months before the Olympics. And so that's when she came to see me. And I'm like, no more failure. Every day you win or you learn. And she got the bronze medal. And I'm so proud of her. And she loved it. She was happy. And, you know, because sometimes if you don't get the gold medal, you think you failed.
Yeah,
But
no.
she got the first medal in
Yeah.
pole vaulting for women in Canada.
Yeah.
And she was so happy. And every day, if you have that mindset, I win or I learn, I turn bad days into good data, you're just so much happier.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
And I think we're really a good example, Adin, of transform your difficult or disability in trying to make better. So when we met also to do this podcast, you bring me the list of your difficulties and then we can deal with it. And I think every woman out there should be doing that because we expect certain things for everyone. That's not true.
Yeah.
And it's so much better to have a relationship when we know what we can do and not expect.
Yeah.
So when you say I'm here and then I need to go away because we learn in
Yeah.
a normal relationship it's not allowed because we need to respect the time and to be social and we learn that and it's I think I'm learned so much with you with these things and also in the relationship with Clara in how to respect her and the limitations. But I have a lot too. And like,
Yeah. Everybody.
There
has-
are no
Yeah.
normal people.
yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, absolutely. You had a question that wasn't on there that you wanted to ask. I think you
We
should.
want to go. So Clara had a traumatic experience when my son David was 5, I think, and they were playing. So they were playing in a big wall, and then she started screaming, and she screams a lot, so we didn't react in now, like we didn't go, and she was holding David in the end, he fell down, and we listened this big noise, and then I was afraid to go out. Carlo went out, and he was mostly without life. And then we had a small
He was mostly what?
without life, not breathing.
He was not
and-
breathing.
Yeah. And then Carlo, we had this small swimming pool, and then Carlo took him and put him in the swimming pool, and then he started breathing again. So we called the ambulance, all these things. We had a red color there, and when we went to the hospital, he had just a small bleeding, but he broke all the skull, like from here to here. And then the doctor said probably he didn't had more bleeding because of the water. And now he can't like be in the sun a lot because he has really strong headaches, and if he runs a lot too, and we think it's because of this damage. And Clara wants to know, she wants to share because for her it was really traumatic. And do you think it's your fault? Yeah. And you want to ask about the headaches, or yeah? And what do you think about the headaches, or
He's how old now?
13?
Yeah. So Irlen.com. I want you to go. Helen Irlen, IRLEN, is a psychologist, and she discovered people become light sensitive after headaches. And it's often miraculous. This pole vaulter I told you had a bad brain injury. When she was in the stadium in Tokyo, she couldn't see because the lights disrupted her vision. And wearing colored filtered lenses makes a huge positive difference. So there's a self-test, Irlen, IRLEN.com. And they have a clinic in Long Beach. So worth looking into because he might have that, and getting it treated is miraculous, and it's so simple.
Yeah, because he loves soccer, but in summertime, like he mostly can't play because he really feel bad, nausea too, and we never went to see again, like to do another MRI or something. But
Yeah, no, you should probably have a SPECT scan to see.
so you feel better now. But you don't need to feel guilt, Clara. It was not your fault. Yeah, you were just playing.
So, Clara,
Mostly-
when I talked about havening, right, it's either this or this. When you feel bad, I want you to think about it, even if it makes you cry. But then I want you to do this for about 20 seconds. Think about it, feel it, and then distract your mind and take yourself to Disneyland or someplace you love, and keep doing it for 2 minutes. And then what you find is it helps your brain process it so it doesn't haunt you. I always say, why was The Walking Dead, a show about zombies, so popular? Because everybody's got zombies in their head, things from the past. Bad thing happened. And havening helps to kill the zombies.
Also for the anxiety moments.
I'm sorry?
The
This
anxiety.
helps also for the anxiety moments.
Helps for the anxiety.
Because Clara has a lot of anxiety, me too, but in different ways. But she has a lot, and we are also doing the
Me
treatment.
too, girl.
But it's like sometimes I even know how to help her because she's so out of and then I'm like breathe but I think
And it's
a
so
good
simple.
technique.
The havening is so
I will
simple.
do this like 10 times a day.
I think, no, oftentimes you pick up on when I'm anxious, even kind of before I do, and you're always like,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of become our routine before we actually film these podcasts, though, would you say? So we're just kind of trying to calm each other down in different ways. Yeah. Havening. That's a great concept. I'll definitely take a look at that for sure. All right. I do have one more question. It might be classified as two, but it's a lot. It kind of talks a little bit more about me and my experience. You talk a lot about in your stuff working with clients with PTSD or clients with varying degrees of trauma. I definitely have a lot of trauma, but the biggest form of trauma that it comes from was being bullied growing up. So I believe I have some childhood trauma from being persistently bullied in my youth. I would have stuff thrown at me. I would be chronically excluded from everything. I felt like I was a ghost all the time. And I was somewhat oblivious to it back then because I thought that was just how people were, because that was just the one school I went to. But then I transferred schools and then subsequently started puberty. And then I had a huge breaking point in my mental health when I was about 14. And I was at the height of puberty, and all my massive self-esteem issues and started to hit me, and all the bullying and like realizing that people were seeing me as less than started to hit me, and I was acting out, and I was having daily meltdowns. I was experiencing symptoms of paranoia. I was extremely anxious. I had a huge crisis when I was 14. So in short, what ultimately happened was I tried to do as much work as I possibly could with my therapist, but then I also went on anxiety medication. So I didn't just take the anxiety medication just as the only solution. I was doing that in conjunction with a lot of work with my therapist, and since then things have totally turned around for me and have been better for me. But what can you tell me about what was going on in my brain that made crying and screaming so comfortable for me? And like, why was that easier than just existing in a calm space?
Well, your brain wasn't right. Your brain was off. And crying and screaming was probably a release for some of those overactive circuits.
Yeah.
But the crying and screaming all by itself is traumatic because you remember the pain. And have you heard of EMDR?
I don't think so, no.
It's a wonderful treatment for trauma. You do it with a therapist. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so if these circuits are overactive, which would have been my guess, so if you would have come to one of my clinics, we'd have looked at your brain. Because how do I know unless you look, right? But what we often see with trauma is too much activity. And when you go back through it and you get your eyes to go back and forth, similar to havening, it brings it up and then it calms it down and goes away. And the crying and screaming probably was the release, but it's really not processing the exclusion, the bullying, the things in the past. I have a patient, it's public knowledge, she works in the White House. And she grew up with a lot of trauma. And I have her scan and her emotional brain, when I first saw her, so busy. And 8 months later, it's so calm. Because we did like 50 sessions of EMDR. And it's a psychological treatment that has biological effects.
I'm curious what that would have looked like for me at the time. I do think that I might still benefit from some principles of it, definitely, because I do still feel like even to this day, I still am working through, the trauma of being bullied. I feel like it has affected my self-esteem, and while I continue to get better at it every single day with my therapist and with just, living my life and learning more things, I know that it's still a struggle for me, and it's still...
So it'd be good to learn about it. So havening.org, also EMDRIA.org, EMDR International Association. Learn about it, because it just can make a massive difference so that the past does not have to haunt
Yeah.
the present. And often with trauma, that becomes the problem.
Yeah.
The past is always in front of you.
Yeah. And I try. to
And I
focus
ask
on the
my
present.
patients to do a timeline. When you see the story of your life, do you see it from left to right in front of you, or do you see it from front to back? And I see mine from front to back. So I see the past behind me. My wife, who grew up with a lot of trauma, she sees it in front of her, which means the past is always informing the present,
Yeah.
which is, Clara asked me, how do you deal with your haters? And they're in the past. I'm like, I don't think about them. But there was a time, I think, where they were in the present. And I teach all of my patients this rule. It's the 18-40-60 rule that says when you're 18, you worry about what everybody's thinking of you. And when you're 40,
Sorry, I look at her because she's 18. So I was
when
like,
you're 40, you don't give a damn what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize nobody has been thinking about you at all. People spend their days worrying and thinking about themselves, not you. So the hater who leaves a comment on the podcast, they thought about you for like 8 seconds.
yeah.
And then they're off thinking about mowing their lawn or going to the grocery store or hating on somebody else. They're not thinking of you, but we take the hate in and then it spins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's important to go, they're not thinking about me. And you said you were paranoid, and paranoid basically means you're thinking people are thinking about you when they probably aren't.
Yeah. That I know that was definitely wrong at the time.
And marijuana increases paranoia.
Yeah, yeah, and then with I'm very happy and take pride in the fact that I have no interest in drinking or doing drugs or doing marijuana. I have friends that say marijuana, is pretty helpful for them in their specific situation. I'm sure.
And I have patients where it has made them psychotic.
Yeah, and then
So-
and then there's that. So I just I definitely don't plan on smoking weed. So that if it's any consolation,
Probably not going to make things.
I'm not Snoop Dogg or anything, but my brain was overworking to an extreme, especially when I was 14, because it wasn't only that, but it was also just homework and I was a freshman in high school, so I just started high school and the work just felt exponentially harder. Just I felt like I couldn't think critically. I felt intellectually inferior in a lot of ways, but it was also right when Common Core really started to get put into place. So every time I would try and ask for help, the teachers would be like, well, think critically. And I'm like, but you don't understand. I need some degree of boost in order to be able to think critically. And they're like, no, well, just think about it. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm asking you to guide me toward thinking critically. I'm asking you to guide me toward how I can even approach the answer. I can't just work with, well, think about it. I can't just work with that because that's nothing to work with because I have been thinking about it. So I'm going to you for help. And, so that was also extremely stressful and overwhelming to me. So it was a lot of that as well. I know a lot of people have brains that are overworking themselves, especially, students in school. I have a friend who gets absolutely fueled by challenging herself to an absolute extreme and working her butt off at everything, and she thrives off of that. But for a lot of people, especially someone like me, it was very, very, very draining. What advice would you give to teachers who still want to promote critical thinking, but also not to overload their students, if that makes sense?
Well, I think it's important to take an individual approach.
Of course,
If you
it's never
take
one size
the
fits all.
same approach to every child, you're going to help some and break others.
Yeah.
And so I think smaller classes, getting to know your students, every day you win or you learn,
Win or learn. And that reminds me of like Star Wars, try not, do or do not. There is no try. That's what I think about. I love that because,
I think of myself as Yoda.
yeah, that's fairly accurate.
I wanted to be Luke Skywalker and be the hero, but I'm the teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Meanwhile, I'm just kind of Jar Jar Binks, I think.
We don't watch Star Wars.
No, it's okay. I've only seen it once. I'm not like a Star Wars fan or anything. Well, I kind of am, but whatever. But yeah, it's references to Yoda being a very, very wise old character who's like 200 years old, and then Jar Jar Binks is like kind of the on the side comedic relief who appears for a moment and like is like, why is this guy useful? And I say that to myself, being Jar Jar Binks as a term of endearment, not as like to insult myself or anything. I think I'm a Yoda in some other ways, definitely. You had one more question? All right, let's finish strong.
6. You've helped so many people change their lives by understanding their brains. But if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice about mental health, what would it be?
Don't believe every stupid thing you think.
Oh, this is for me.
This is so important.
Yeah.
I was 28 years old in my psychiatric residency at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And one of our professors said, you have to teach your patients not to believe every stupid thing they think. And I'm like, but I believe every stupid thing I think. That no one in school had ever taught me how to manage my mind. And another technique I give my patients is give your mind a name so you can gain psychological distance from the chatter in your head. And I named mine after my pet raccoon. I had a pet raccoon when I was 16, and I loved her, but she was a troublemaker. And that's my mind. It's a troublemaker. So whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, just write down what you're thinking and then ask yourself, is it true? Do you absolutely know that's true? Like I get a thought, my wife never listens to me. And I'm like, that's not true. But if I don't question it, I believe it. And then I act out of the belief that it's true.
Yeah.
And I give myself permission to be rude to her, which means she's never going to listen to me because she's going to want to get rid of me.
Yeah.
And it's just, I got an email today from a playwright in London who wants to do a play. I wrote a children's book called Captain Snout and the Superpower Questions, because I teach people to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal their happiness. And Captain Snout is an anteater, right? If you're going to kill the ants, might as well feed them to an anteater. And I'm so excited about that, because if we're going to make a difference in this mental health crisis among young people, we have to teach them to manage their mind. This is not a Prozac deficiency. It's a deficiency in their ability to manage their minds.
Did you say Prozac deficient, like the medication?
Yes.
That I'm on?
So for your brain, Prozac's a good thing, right? Because your frontal lobes, if I had to guess, and I've seen 260,000 scans, so I'm a pretty good guesser.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, your frontal lobes work too hard, and what Prozac does is it calms things down, and it just helps you shift your attention more easily. So you're less rigid, less worried, and less depressed.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I am a fan of medicine but targeted to your brain. And so, but the mental health epidemic in America is not a Prozac deficiency.
Yeah.
It's because most kids don't know how to manage their minds.
Yeah.
And teaching people to manage their minds, I think, is as important as algebra.
Yeah.
And I haven't used algebra in so many years.
Well,
So it's probably more important than algebra.
You bring up a great case for making that a class, like, because there's health class, but and physical health is obviously extremely important, but so is your brain.
Well, we have a course called
Yeah.
Brain Thrive by 25 that's been taught all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
where we teach kids to love and care for their brains. And in the class, we teach them to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts.
That reminds me. I know I mentioned Snoop Dogg as the allegory for the guy who smokes weed all the time, but he started a children's show where he has like a bunch of children's songs, and one phrase in one of the children's songs that he made that really struck with me was, "I love my brain. I love my brain. And it's a lot of like affirming things like that, and I was just like, where was that when I was that age? I was.
There was nowhere.
Yeah, I wasn't taught to love my brain. I was taught to.
No, but
if
we're going to
anything,
do that
yeah.
going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
gonna
we're
love
doing
our
it
brains.
now.
And we're doing it now. Inclusion matters because it is so important for all kinds of brains, whether, neurodivergent or not. It's a beautiful thing. And there is so much beauty that is possible with the right resources. And you, Dr. Amen, are a hugely valuable resource. So it was such an honor to talk to you today. And we're getting through our issues, right? We got a lot of stuff that continues to come our way. Even you have things that come your way too. We're all just working at this thing called life, and it's a beautiful thing.
Win or learn.
Win or learn.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Such a joy.
An
for
absolute
me to be with
pleasure.
Clara again. Nice
Of
to
course.
meet you, Adrian.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Cheers. Until the next episode.